Every so often, Ready or Not decides to dip its toes into the murky waters of political commentary. Scattered throughout the game, you'll find levels that touch on everything from the removal of veteran benefits to climate change, human trafficking, and gun violence. And while these are all really heavy, uncomfortable subjects to talk about, they're also ones that have been sort of explored to death within video games. But there's one mission in Ready or Not that does something a bit differently. It brings up a subject that I almost never see represented in video games: illegal immigration. And today, I want to take a closer look at how the game handles it, what it's trying to say, whether it's saying anything at all, and why I think this depiction matters. Now, the mission Rust Belt starts out with a call from an unknown LSPD informant. He tells us that there's a ranch out at the Costa Vino Border Reserve that's being run by the Los Locos del Pacificos. Now, for those of you guys who might not be familiar, the Los Locos are a gang that we've seen before. We saw them trafficking drugs in the mission Twisted Nerve. But aside from drugs, it seems that they've now moved into smuggling people across the US border. Now, in real life, using coyotes to smuggle people is fairly common. In fact, that's sort of the traditional way to hop the border illegally. You hire a coyote and they facilitate your journey. Back to our briefing though, it's mentioned that there are tunnels under this ranch that supposedly run all the way to Tijuana. So our job is to infiltrate this place, shut down the smuggling operation, and hopefully arrest a few of the names within the Los Locos network. But with that being said, it's time for us to pack up our gear and make our way towards the Costa Vino Border Reserve. Now, one of the first things that you'll notice about this map is how different it feels from the rest of the game. Aside from maybe Lethal Obsession, this is easily the most remote location in the base game, and the further that you push in, the more isolated everything begins to feel. From the outside, there's a barn, a storage shed, and a small house. And around the property, there are a few unarmed civilians and several armed gang members. If you're playing with less lethal equipment, you can easily resolve most of these encounters non-lethally though, which is worth doing because an S rank on this mission reveals some new details at the end of the level. It's also worth mentioning that outside, if you look up, you'll notice a surveillance drone floating around overhead, which is the same drone that Border Tech has been using to get photos of the area. This single drone is likely how they were able to find the area to begin with. Working our way inside of the house though, you'll find a kitchen packed with luggage, stacks of cash, and even confiscated passports. It almost seems like it's some sort of checkpoint. Maybe the smugglers were demanding more payment before letting people go, or perhaps they were just shaking them down for everything they had left. The fact that these passports were being taken is interesting to me though. Maybe the Los Locos planned to sell them once they got back across the border, or maybe it was just another way for them to maintain control over these people. In the next room over, we can find a shrine dedicated to the Virgin Mary, with prayers and names scribbled all around it. And when I went through and translated all of this text, one of the prayers in particular sort of stood out to me, and it reads as follows. This is a prayer for all the travelers, for the ones who start out in beauty, who fall from grace, who step gingerly looking for the way back, and for those born into the margins, who travel from one liminal space to another, crossing boundaries in search of sinner. End quote. To me, this prayer is a reminder that these people aren't just nameless figures, they're human beings, and they're risking everything for a chance at a better life. If we work our way past this though, we'll actually find the entrance to the tunnel where all this smuggling is going through. And with nowhere else up here to really investigate, we're forced to make our way underground. Now, if you guys are anything like me, you'll quickly sort of stare in disbelief at the size of these tunnels. When I first booted this mission up, I was expecting those really creepy, dark crackhead tunnels like you see in the mission Twisted Nerve, but the coyotes here have actually reinforced and lit their tunnels. In terms of the smuggling operations that we've seen in the game thus far, this one's actually pretty advanced. Heading further down these tunnels though, we'll eventually come to an intersection. And if you turn left, you'll come across something strange. Ancient ruins. The architecture of the tunnels subtly starts to shift, and we can watch on as cave paintings begin to appear on the walls and ceiling. It seems that the Los Locos accidentally dug into some kind of old fort or sacred site, and instead of working around it, they just kept going through it. Continuing through this passage, though, we eventually come upon another intersection. We can either go through a large pipe on the left or follow an old minecart track on the right. Now, as you guys can probably guess, it is incredibly easy to get lost in this map. So for now, we're going to keep it simple and stick to the track. That way, if we get turned around, we can just follow it back to where we started. Moving down this hallway, though, we'll pass through several small rooms, and most of these look like makeshift rest stops for people that are making the journey. There's sleeping bags on the ground, discarded luggage, and even prayers scribbled onto the walls. It's all a little sad, honestly, but exactly what you'd expect to see at this point. If we head left from here, we'll find another section of those ancient ruins. However, these ones are partially flooded. Now, there's not much over here aside from a cave painting depicting a massive storm and a couple of enemies lying in wait. There's not much noteworthy, so for now, we'll backtrack to where we were. From here, we'll come across the only two paths that we haven't explored yet. The first leads to an old abandoned well. Now, at first, I figured that maybe the Coyotes and cartel had been using it for dead drops, lowering supplies from the surface to the people down below. But there's not really any evidence in the level to confirm that, so for now, we'll just move on. The only other path leads to a pair of double doors, marked with a Spanish phrase that roughly translates to, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter." Not exactly a comforting sight. However, with nothing else left to investigate, we don't really have a choice here. So reluctantly, we'll stack up and head deeper into the caves. Through this path, we won't find much more of note though, aside from another one of those camp rooms. In this one though, we'll actually find some children's toys scattered across the ground, indicating that at least in some cases, there are entire families going through here trying to get into the US. But finally though, at the end of this hallway, we'll come across the door that'll lead us into the primary point of this operation. This door opens up into a massive cave. And in addition to enemies, we can also see a ton of different places for people to take cover at. So we'll need to be especially careful in here. I found that a good technique for this spot is to throw out a couple of tear gas canisters. That way you can quickly make your way towards the enemy without being shot at. Once we're able to subdue these guys though, we can actually find the boat that they've been shuttling people on. This is how they were able to get people all the way from Tijuana. They didn't build tunnels all the way there, they simply followed this subterranean river. It seems that it must have been quite a long boat ride too, because we can see a considerable amount of supplies for just that one journey. Perhaps the voyage lasted a couple of days, or maybe they just had that many people on board. We can't really say for certain. With that though, we've seen just about everything that Rust Belt has to offer. So with that being said, let's head back to the station for debrief. Now this mission only really has two pieces of evidence that I would consider important, and the first is a paper titled Watch List. Now this paper has a list of Border Patrol agents and the time of their shift, detailing different notes on each of the agents. It seems that the Los Locos and the cartel have been tracking which officers they might need to keep an eye out for, and ominously some of the names on the paper have been crossed out, implying that the cartel has already dealt with them. Now honestly, I think it would be a bit foolish for the cartel to just outright kill these men, because it would wind up starting an entire investigation, but if you translate some of the notes, some of them talk about knowing where these officers live. So perhaps if a particular border agent has been causing them too much trouble, they just wait for him when he gets home. The next piece of evidence is also really unsettling. It displays a text exchange between an unknown number and one of the people using the tunnel, and it reads as follows, quote, "LSPD is tracking distribution. Go to the tunnel with what you have now. Bring cash for trip. 150,000 from the safe. Okay, driving. Go straight to the water. Don't look if you hear a child crying. There are no children in the tunnel." Now this text right here gives the mission a whole new sinister connotation. We know for a fact that there were children in those tunnels, because throughout the level we can find children's toys scattered about it. But why would the Los Locos or the cartel be trying to hide this? Why would they be nervous about other people learning about the kids in the tunnels? After all, they're facilitating thousands of people to get into the US, and that includes families. What would freak them out so badly about these kids? Well, perhaps the kids didn't come willingly. We've seen before how far the human trafficking ring in this game reaches, and in a separate storyline we'll find out that it's still ongoing. Maybe the Los Locos are using these same tunnels for sex trafficking. Now, to be fair, that is just a theory that is never explicitly stated anywhere in the level at all. I'm just trying to draw a couple of connections here and work with the dots that I've been provided. But regardless of all that, our notes on this text message say, quote, LSPD Search and Rescue conducted an operation to locate the crying child as mentioned in the text, but were unsuccessful, end quote. This child, by all accounts, was never found, and with everything that we've seen in this city so far, we can only assume the worst. And that's where the mission leaves us, with more questions than answers. Are the Los Locos involved in sex trafficking? How many more tunnels are there? And for the people using them, are they actually able to reach a better life on the other side? What I appreciate about Ready or Not's depiction here is that it highlights the impossible choices that some people are forced to make. They're willing to hike through flooded caves, put their lives in the hands of cartel smugglers, and even board a sketchy-ass boat just for the shot at something better. But in Ready or Not's version of America, they're not arriving in this land of opportunity, they're simply crawling their way to a different layer of hell. But as always, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch today's video. You know I love you. I'm out.